Good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is BRN AM for Wednesday, October 9th, 2019. Here are your top stories. U.S. workers are spending close to $7,700 a year on healthcare. Here's what you can do. And is it always right to delay your Social Security? As we've been reporting here on this network, healthcare costs are veering out of control. Joining me now is Maurie Backman. She's a personal finance reporter with the Motley to talk about this very important issue. Maurie, how are you doing this morning?
Not too bad, although I have to say I've been a little bit under the weather, so I may need to go see a doctor, and for that I'll need to, use my health insurance plan.
Well, it's a perfect segue. It's at the top of the show. I talked about the article you wrote where the average worker is spending close to $7,700 a year on healthcare expenses. Healthcare is really veering out of control.
It really is. And I mean, these days, actually, you have a lot more people who are on high deductible plans, which is just, adding to their costs. Often with a high deductible plan, you maybe save a little bit on your premiums, but if you get sick a lot or tend to need a lot of medical care, you don't typically come out ahead. So it's a problem. And then, of course, when you factor in, co-pays and all that other good stuff, Americans are spending a lot of money to keep themselves healthy.
Yeah, or in some cases, just keeping themselves just, walking and just, trying to get into the office and do work or whatever. I mean, it really is out of control with no signs in sight. I know the article you wrote was based on a Bank of America study, and it looks like a great portion is going towards the premium. But then, as you said, the co-pays, the deductible, the prescription drugs, all these things add up. And we're talking about the average worker. We're not talking about an affluent person. We're talking about the average American worker.
Right. And we're also not necessarily talking about those workers either who have some sort of debilitating condition or really troubling disease that needs a lot of care. For those people, their costs are obviously going to be a lot more. The same tends to hold true for families with, lots of children. Children are germ magnets. I can say that from firsthand experiences. There are weeks where I actually visit the doctor every single day. So between my 3 kids. So yeah, it adds up.
Absolutely. And this show is about saving, but the reason why we're talking about healthcare is because it's these types of things that can actually impugn or prevent your ability to save. If you're just scraping to get by, paying your bills, you get sick, you've got to lug one of your children to the doctor, or multiple children to the doctor, or yourself to the doctor. These things really can be devastating in a way to a person's budget.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why I always tell people factor healthcare expenses into your budget. Take a look at your bills and receipts from the last couple of years, see what you spent on average, maybe pad that sum a little bit, and factor that in there because chances are other stuff is going to come up. The other thing I like to tell people is, take advantage of tax-advantaged healthcare savings accounts if you can. Almost anyone can contribute to an FSA. That's a flexible spending account. You get to put some money in there. It goes in tax-free. So if you put in $1,000, that's $1,000 the IRS won't tax you on. You can use that money to pay for near-term medical expenses, whether it's co-pays or medications, whatnot. The only catch with FSAs is they work on a use it or lose it basis, so that you typically have to use up your funds by the end of your plan year, or you risk forfeiting them. That's the only tricky thing.
One of the things that you talked about in your article was choosing the right plan. And I want to talk a little bit about that because when I was growing up, and even into my work years, we had very limited choices. We didn't have some of these more flexible plans. What did you take us through that? What did you mean by pick the right plan for you?
Well, I guess first of all, it depends on where you're picking from, because if you're employed, much of the time it does make sense to go through one of the health plans that your employer is willing to offer, only because the majority of companies do subsidize those premiums. So for example, if the premium would normally be $542 out of pocket to you, you might only be paying $37 per paycheck or something like that to be a part of that plan. So depending on, the options that are available to you, it generally pays to stick with one of your employer's plans, but usually you'll get a choice, and or if you're buying on the open marketplace, you get a choice. And typically what you're choosing between at the end of the day is premium versus deductible.
Right.
A lot of times it really boils down to that, and your premium is what you're going to be paying. Think of it as your fee for the privilege of having your health plan, whereas your deductible is what you're going to be paying out of pocket before that health plan kicks in to cover your services. And they tend to have an inverse relationship. Higher premiums tend to translate into lower deductibles, and then higher deductibles, lower premiums.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, a lot of people don't take advantage of the health savings account, which I know in the retirement industry we've been talking a lot about. These are not new, but I guess this is a form of almost like a deferral where someone can take money out of their paycheck, put it away. You were kind of talking about this before with an FSA, and then it grows based on an investment. So you're in like a target date fund or some type of investment. And I guess the risk there is you are paying a lower premium. Oftentimes you have a higher deductible, but it's all on how you consume healthcare.
Exactly. And HSAs are actually a great tool now with a growing number of people being on high deductible plans. I think we're going to see more people enrolling in HSAs. Like you said, basically with an HSA, you can put in money for near-term medical expenses, but unlike FSAs, those funds don't expire at the end of a given year. In fact, the whole point of an HSA is actually to put in more money than you think you'll use in a given year because you get to invest the difference. The gains on your investments are actually completely tax-free, and withdrawals are tax-free as well, provided they're used for qualified medical expenses. Now, I guess you could conceivably run into a situation where you contribute aggressively to an HSA year after year, and then you're sitting there in retirement and you're in great health, and suddenly you have all this excess cash, but it's a rare problem and it's a very good problem to have. And actually, if you don't tap your HSA until age 65, even if you use your funds for non-medical purposes, you actually won't face an early withdrawal penalty like you will if you access those funds for non-medical purposes earlier in life. So right. There's really limited risk with an HSA.
And a lot of Americans now are coming up on what's called open enrollment. And that's when, if you work for an employer who offers you benefits, you can go through and choose healthcare, a supplemental plan, long-term care. This is the time to kind of do the math. And would you say that it's a good thing to kind of take out the bills from the past couple of years if you have them? Maybe you go onto your bank account and look at what you spent and then try to figure out what the best plan is for you. Because like everything else, things change over time. Your health changes over time. And maybe it makes sense to go from a lower deductible plan to a higher deductible plan.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you definitely want to look at all that stuff. You also want to see, what you're eligible for. If you're eligible for an HSA, if paying a slightly higher deductible bumps you into that HSA category. The other thing is that some companies actually do contribute to HSAs on their employees' behalf, kind of like how some companies give you a 401k match. So if you've got that kind of setup and it's a generous contribution on your employer's part, that could kind of build the case for a high deductible plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last point you made in the piece that you wrote was get ahead of your healthcare issues, because these things only snowball. And I know a lot of Americans out there, maybe they don't go to the doctor, they don't go to the dentist on a regular basis, the optometrist, whatever. I always get it wrong. But a lot of these plans have that built in. It really makes sense. Neither of us are doctors, but it really makes sense to do some preventative care.
It definitely does. I'll tell one quick story. This actually happened to me, and this is let this be a lesson for all of you people out there. I was like 22, fairly broke, bit down on a hard candy, broke a tooth. Didn't want to pay to go to the dentist, so I kind of just spit the remainder of the candy along with my, splintered off tooth into the garbage and kind of called it a day. And I didn't really think much of it. I figured, hey, it's a back tooth. I'll deal with it eventually. No one can see it. And a couple of weeks later, I woke up with this throbbing pain in my mouth. And next thing you knew, I was on the hook for like a $1,700 root canal that I had to pay for out of pocket. And it was a 3-4 appointment process. And it was horribly painful and horribly expensive. Whereas had I gone the first time to the dentist when that happened, he probably would have shaved down the tooth, maybe put in a little filling or whatnot, cleaned it out, and I would have been one appointment, less pain, couple $100 and done. So take it from young and stupid me. Don't put off healthcare issues.
Yeah, very important. And bacterium lives everywhere. And if you expose yourself to it, chances are you're going to pick it up, and it's best to deal with it. Maurie, great article. If you wouldn't mind staying with us, I want to shift gears when we come back and talk about Social Security. So do you have a couple minutes for us?
Absolutely.
And when we come back, have you filed for Social Security yet? Well, hold that thought. Maurie Backman is going to be back, and you may want to hear what she has to say. So stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. You know, many Americans have delayed filing for the Social Security in order to maximize their benefits. But is that always the best choice? Well, Maurie Backman from the Motley is still with us, and we're going to discuss. Maurie, thanks for sticking around with us this morning.
Yeah, no problem.
So take us through. This is, you know, it used to be the rule of thumb, delay, 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 delay. And give us the mathematics a little bit behind that. Why delay?
Sure. So Social Security, basically, in a nutshell, your monthly benefit is derived by taking your average monthly earnings, and, you know, those earnings are indexed for inflation. Your average wage, basically, over your 35 highest paid years on the job. There's a formula that's applied to that number, and that establishes your primary insurance amount, which is the amount you get to collect in benefits, each month once you retire. You get your full monthly benefit once you reach full retirement age. That age for anyone born in 1960 or later is going to be 67. If you were born prior to that, it's going to be either 66 or 66 in a certain number of months, depending on when you were born. And that age is important because, again, that's when you get your benefit in full. You're allowed to file as early as age 62, but doing so reduces your benefit. But there's a flip side, and it's for each month you delay benefits past your full retirement age, you get to accrue what are known as delayed retirement credits. And those end up boosting your benefits by 8% a year. So
now,
it's a big boost to your income, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was really shocked to learn that the average earner can only expect to replace about 40% of his or her income from Social Security. I guess I'm not shocked because I've been in this field for a long time, but I'm going to be pretending to be shocked that this is such a big deal because you should have some other means to save. But that's not a lot. And regardless of whether or not you delay, how much are you really boosting this?
Right. Well, I mean, the thing is, you can actually boost your benefits quite a bit by delaying because you're allowed to accrue these credits we just talked about up until age 70. So that, if you're full retirement age of 67, you could get a 24% increase. I mean, that's pretty huge. You could take, like a roughly $1,600 monthly benefit up to close to $2,000, by delaying. So It's a strategy that's often recommended for people who are short on personal retirement savings or don't have another obvious source of income outside of Social Security, because like you said, those benefits typically replace about 40% of your former paycheck. Most seniors, the rule of thumb is they need roughly 70 to 80% of their former income to live comfortably, cover expenses like housing, healthcare, a little bit of modest leisure. So obviously, if you're coming into retirement without a pension and you're coming in with, a mere $30,000 in your IRA, you're going to be heavily reliant on Social Security. So you'll often hear that if you're in that boat, it pays to delay benefits to boost them.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting when you get to the P's, it's not always a perfect road if you do delay it, because oftentimes it comes down to mortality, unfortunately. So you could delay, but if you have a low mortality predisposition to certain diseases in your family, all of that kind of has to come into it, right?
Yeah, I mean, so the convention used to be delay, but the thing about delaying benefits is that it does increase your Social Security income on a monthly basis. What you really want to do when making the decision as to whether or not to delay is think about how you'll come away on a lifetime basis. That's important because Social Security, a lot of people don't know this, it's technically designed to pay you the same lifetime total, regardless of when you initially file. Because the logic is that if you file a little bit earlier, you'll collect less money each month, but you'll collect more individual payments. And then on the flip side, if you delay, you'll get more money each month, but you'll get fewer payments because you delayed a few years. So it's supposed to technically all even out if you live an average life expectancy. But if you don't, if, like you said, you have a health condition or you just unfortunately have a family history of dying young and you don't think you'll make it, into your 80s, then it generally actually does not pay to delay benefits at all.
And then, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that if you have a surviving spouse, he or she is eligible to receive your benefits. But if you do not, those benefits just go away after you pass away.
Right, correct. So if you don't have a survivor designated, then exactly. So, that's an interesting point you bring up because the advice I just gave really kind of only applies if you are single and only have yourself to worry about. If you're just thinking about yourself and you're in really poor health, it often pays to claim benefits early. But let's say you have a spouse who's going to be reliant on your benefits, and that spouse is a lot younger and a lot healthier than you are. Then all of a sudden you're in a situation where, well, the more you collect, the more your spouse collects. So when you think about that lifetime calculation and you have a spouse, you can include your spouse in that lifetime calculation and run the numbers and see what actually makes the most sense for your family.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not simple math. It's not easy to do. And this underscores why it's important oftentimes to sit down with someone, to evaluate someone as a professional who can help you walk through. And even if you're the most sophisticated investor, you still need someone to kind of walk through with you to understand taxation, how benefits are taxed, what benefits you're going to get, what benefits you're not going to get, what tax bracket you're going to be in. I think that this is really an often underestimated aspect of the retirement conversation.
Right. Well, the other thing, too, is that sometimes sitting down with an outside professional can give you a little bit of a reality check. Because let's face it, it's not really easy to think about the age at which you'll die, right? Like, it's not an easy conversation to have with your spouse. It's not an easy thought pattern to put into your own head. Like, do I really think I'll live past 75? Do I think I'll live past 80? It's uncomfortable. It's the same reason why so many people put off creating a will, because they don't want to think about it, even though it's an important thing to do. It's awkward. It's icky,
Yeah.
But that way, if you do sit down with someone to help you kind of work through the decision, that person can sort of like maybe give you a little bit of tough love if you need and say, look, you're coming up on your early 60s. You have emphysema, you're a lifetime smoker, or you're obese, you've never managed to lose weight, you have diabetes, you have all these different health conditions. Let's be real. How long do you think you're gonna live realistically?
Yeah, it really is. I just, last comment I'll make is I think a lot of people don't want to have the retirement conversation or think about retirement because it does bring up mortality. And none of us want to talk about mortality. But again, it's important because we're going to live we're going to love, and unfortunately, we're going to pass away. So, hate to end it on that, Maurie, but hope you feel better. And always great chatting with you. Great insight into healthcare and Social Security this week. And look forward to having you back on the show very, very soon. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jeff.
Well, folks, that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a financial topic you'd like for us to cover? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the news in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, and more, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.